Blake, what's the first book you've ever read?
Toby, I could read before I was even one.
Welcome to the Church Gear Podcast, where we pull the tech out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your host, Blake Hodges, a man who memorized Curious George as a baby and freaked my dad's friends out to great effect. And I'm here with my co-host who still has to use voice to text because he can't read or write, Toby Walters.
And I was going to say, reading the menu at White Castle doesn't count as reading.
Listen, Toby, if you feed a baby White Castle, they'll combust. I'm a trash panda. I don't eat a White Castle. That's nasty.
It is nasty, but you're from Smyrna, the, kind of redneck country of Nashville.
You've never been to Shelbyville, if you're saying that about Smyrna.
I've driven through Shelbyville, and I love it's written Shelbyville, but we call it Shelbyville.
If you're from there, it's Shelbyville.
Yeah. So, Blake, I don't know if I can remember the first book I ever read. I remember something about...
You still haven't read a book, Toby.
There was one that was one of my favorites, and it was The Day That Jimmy's Boa Constrictor Ate the Wash. And it was a kid's book, but I remember loving it when I was in early elementary school.
Like he ate the washing machine?
No, he ate the wash hanging out on the clothesline. Like a boa constrictor ate a bunch of clothes. And as a kid, it was super cute, but it's sort of a silly concept.
I hope you're not eating for this. There have been a couple of times where people have gotten drunk and passed out in places where there's boa constrictors, and they have eaten them. I've seen the videos.
I know that there are giant pythons in Indonesia that have eaten small humans.
No.
Small
We're
adult
talking
humans.
full adults.
No, I'm saying full adults, but they're not 6 foot tall.
So do we think they could eat Shaq if
Eat
Shaq was drunk?
No.
Okay.
There's no way. There's just not a snake big enough outside of the old movie Anaconda. Did you ever see that stupid movie in the 90s?
I did, and
Yeah.
I may or may not be asking AI right now if it...
What's the biggest? So speaking of AI, I wrote a book, and I wrote it myself, okay?
We don't believe you, Toby,
I know,
at all.
I know. You don't believe me. You believe the AI wrote it for me, but I wrote it myself. And now, of course, therefore, you don't know if it's any good. But I wrote it myself. And I asked chat, actually, what percentage of U.S. adults have ever written a book? Do you have a guess, Blake?
I'm going to say 11%, and only 8% have published them.
Did you cheat?
Yes,
you did.
I prepped the outline for this
So
episode,
is that
Toby.
what? You're looking at it's actually 15% of
There we
U.S.
go.
adults have started a book and 8% finished.
I still
think
got
that's
it wrong.
way high. That's almost 1 in 10 U.S. adults have written a book.
Well, the internet has a lot of garbage, Toby.
That is true.
Apparently, Shaq could not be consumed, so
No.
he is safe to travel abroad.
And thank you for fact checking that on ChatGPT, even though AI knows no facts. It's just making this stuff up as it goes. Much like my book.
I was about to say, very human of it.
Yeah. All right. So we're announcing to our audience, this is actually the first of our series on my book. So everybody listening, I wrote a book. It's called Sacred Spaces, Modern Worship, and it's generally about church production. It's taking the stories from our delightful podcast guests, the expertise that they have, trying to pare it down into principles that can then be utilized to make production better at a church of any size or budget.
How many pages is it?
So I don't know the page count yet. The word count is a little under 40,000 words. So it's probably about 200 pages.
What is your
typical book
favorite
size.
word of the 40,000?
The.
Okay.
Yeah. Blake, I do think your name makes an appearance.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's, fully derogatorily sarcastic, but yes, does make an appearance. So for our listeners, TobyWalters.com or churchgear.com/TobyWalters, we do have a pre-order up. The book is planning to launch early 2026. That's a plan right now, but you can actually pre-order it at TobyWalters.com or churchgear.com/TobyWalters, and we'll keep telling you this until you do it. So I would suggest going to do it.
Or until the page is up, because I'm now realizing we're talking about the future. We still got to get that webpage up, Toby.
Well, we'll make sure this podcast doesn't release until that page is up.
Hey,
It's just project mapping.
I love that you have that much confidence in our competence.
So a little more context about the book. We're talking 10 chapters. And so some of the topics are the history of church production and a theology around it, even biblical references on, theology of church production and right-sizing your expectations, elements of excellent production, simple strategies to achieve an excellent Sunday. Even in the last chapter of the book, I brought together, I'm really excited about this, a mastermind of 30 different people in the church production world that are, heavy hitters of church production, the biggest churches out there, the biggest, church production experts in the industry. And we all kind of like just dreamed about, what is this all going to look like in 20, 30, 50 years as far as church production, where we're going? And of course, it's all a guess, but it was fun to do that one.
All right, let's go to the future right now. Toby, what did they say?
They said it's going to be vastly different, but not that different, because as we all know, in Back to the Future, have you seen Back to the Future 2, Blake?
Listen, I think Back to the Future is the one franchise where the whole thing is good.
Yeah. So when they had, flying cars in, what was it, 2022 or something like that, and then we all got to 2022 and we're like, oh yeah, it's not the future like they predicted at all.
No flying cars, but how about a self-driving car, kind of?
Kind of, yes. So thankfully, though, I wrote the book with the help of interviews from all sorts of wonderful experts in the space of church production. And, in order to start us off with, again, the very first episode of the series on the book, I think we should bring in somebody that has, is the wisest of all the church production gurus.
Yeah, we need to import some knowledge here. So our biggest import, the best, the brightest, the most smartest, wisest import ever, the Sweetwater Living Song Market Manager, Kent Morris, is welcome to the show. Welcome to joining us. I'm not saying any of this right.
No, that was wildly wrong.
That he's been brought in.
Kent, can you tell us what you actually do at Sweetwater?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me, guys. I am the live sound market manager at Sweetwater. So I do a lot of training, anything involving production, loudspeakers, consoles, that kind of thing. That's what I do.
I turned sound into song. That's where I messed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Kent, thankfully, you know what you're getting yourself into, because you've hung around with us for a bit over the last couple of years. So you only have yourself to blame at this point, Kent.
That is true.
Yeah. Now, I like to say you are the best dressed man in church production. Blake, do you have any challengers that you can think of?
I mean, if Lee Fields with his cowboy boots wants to try to make a claim, I can't think of anybody else that's known for wearing a certain thing.
Yeah.
We all pretty much wear black.
That's right. But Ken, as the best dressed man in church production, give us a little snapshot of your background. How'd you get started in church production, and what qualifies you to be the best dressed man in church production?
I don't know about that, but I was born in Mexico. My parents were missionaries down in Cuernavaca. We worked with the Hicholi Indian tribes there in the backcountry, and that was in the early 60s. My father was a musician, was on the Louisiana Hayride and the Opry and that type of thing. Very gifted, and gave that up and went to seminary, met my mom to be, and they went off to Mexico. And so I grew up around, these are very antiquated technologies, but Bell and Howell projectors, Wallensack reel-to-reel recorders, that type of thing. And he had a big radio ministry there. So when they would break, I would take them apart, and just loved how they were mechanically functioning. And when they were not functioning, so, well, this is wrong. And it just seemed like the coolest thing in the world to me. And because of that, then I got into music and figured out very quickly that I was much more useful to the band as a front of house engineer than as a keyboardist. So it broadened from there. And I just was so fortunate and blessed to be picked up by Maranatha Music, Integrity Music, Promise Keepers, worked for Peavey Electronics for 25 years. A great debt of gratitude to Hartley Peavey, and just was able to start teaching and taught for Sweetwater beginning 25 years ago or something. So that all came together. Was also, and still am, on staff at First Baptist Atlanta with Dr. Charles Stanley, who recently passed 2 years ago. And part of his method of operating, you've probably all seen him on TV, a very distinguished gentleman from Virginia, as he drops his R's. But he was very much into three things: always look your best, always do your best, and always be your best. And part of that looking your best was to dress appropriately for church at that time, especially being a large Southern Baptist church. But not my internal take to it is that it is not something where you're putting on airs, as we say in the country, but respecting what I represent. So if I represent First Baptist Atlanta, or if I represent Sweetwater, I want to represent them at the highest level. And that's where it all comes from.
Blake, do you ever look your best or do your best or be your best?
I think the problem is, Toby, this is me looking and acting my best.
I mean,
just
here
not
on the
that
pod,
great.
like you put on pants intentionally for the podcast, which is different than normal life.
Oh, I changed outfits right before I came here.
Yeah, as did I.
I was in commander's gear.
I know. Kent, it's been complained around church gear that I wear flip-flops or go barefoot on the podcast, so now I have to wear shoes. I find it highly offensive.
I love them. The red shoes are awesome. I love them.
Thank you.
Red
See,
is
Blake?
not a brand color of ours, and if I could ever get a hold of these shoes, when we go to Texas, I might burn them.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Everything's legal in Texas.
That's right. So we all have, Kent, we have our own unique context of, the world or history. And so for me, my unique context of church production, I began in 1993 when I was in 8th grade. Blake, that was the year you were born.
Dang, Toby, I didn't know we had that big of an age gap
I know.
between us. The maturity
Yes.
level is virtually the same.
So, from my perspective, it was kind of like, oh, this is where church production began. But I assume it didn't begin in 1993. So, give us a history lesson on church production. Did it begin before 1993? Is it before electricity? Where do we even think that all of this started?
In the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was with
And Blake is right. I mean, God said, let there be light because sound was already working. Right? So-
Oh,
Sound man joke.
I've never heard that.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
fresh to me.
Oh, you've never heard that? Yeah, that's a classic. No, but if you look back, and I just love this because, again, God's fingerprints are on everything. Even in his speaking, when he said, let us make man in our image, and all of the mechanical aspect of it, and then all the electronic aspect of it, but then moving into, say, the tabernacle, and the building of Solomon's temple, everything there is detailed. I mean, you read through the scriptures and it's, this is going to be exactly this length and this width, and it's made with no iron tools. Everything had to be brought ready to install there. In other words, they didn't build it on site. What we call prefab. So in integration, we prefab things. We get all the gear in the case of Sweetwater, to Sweetwater Integration down in Pensacola. We prefab it in the room. We test all the gear, loom all the cables, and then we ship that prepackaged box to the church and put it in. So they were doing prefab thousands of years ago. That's what God did not want iron tool noises made there. He was very precise about it. So everything that is done in context of technology, not necessarily sound, lights, and video, but in context of building technology or fabric technology, everything was so specific, and he had such a vision for it. And God then could have, obviously, he spoke the world into existence, could have spoken the tabernacle and Solomon's temple into existence, but instead he chose to use the hands of the men and women tasked with that. And so they did it at an extremely high level. So to me, that's why technology is vital to church. And one of the few things that gets me angry, because I'm very quiet and subdued, is that when someone says, well, it's good enough for church. No, it's not good enough for church. It has to be at an exceedingly high level. Now, this does not lead to perfection. This leads to understanding the value of what we do. And so from that beginning, through the time of Jesus, and we often think of him as the carpenter, but he was probably more of a mason, and he was very detailed in his masonry work. The fish nets that the fishermen that he called to be disciples, they were highly skilled. That was the high technology of their day. The Roman roads that were built were the highest technology possible, which carried the gospel. So all of this technology comes into play. But then we have the fall of the Roman Empire. And the fall of the Roman Empire simply meant that it moved from a secular entity into a religious entity. That is, the Roman Empire simply became the Roman Catholic Church. And that technology then being utilized through the Middle Ages. The key element there was that we had secular technology in the form of theater, right? Theater's been around forever. And our ancients were so gifted at understanding the acoustics that were necessary. They did not build acoustic panels. What they built were buildings, rooms, and structures that naturally worked with the acoustics that they understood empirically. So they would put slits in limestone seating so that it would then become an aperture that would then trap the sound. They oriented the stage that at night, the light, or at afternoon, the light would hit perfectly and then mirror that back. So they had stage lighting from the sun, all these kind of things. Well, that fell into disrepair because the church saw stage theatrics and everything associated with it that we would call media today as inherently evil. But then it was redeemed because as the populace became illiterate, they had to understand the gospel through visual arts, right? So we had stained glass, and stained glass is simply an LED wall without electricity. That's all it is. And stories were told that way. The aspect then became what were termed passion plays, especially around 1000 to 1100 AD in Switzerland, Austria, as they became more and more elaborate, more and more costumes. And now you have professional actors and professional seamstress and professional stage designers all through that time period within the church. So the church led the arts. We know from the Renaissance. I mean, so many artists through the Renaissance are on a basis of a church-oriented life understanding. So that's what the context was, the subject matters were, and all of that then led to where we turned into the Industrial Revolution. And now all of that natural became mechanical first, and then electric, and then electronic, and now digital. It's just simply a theme of this all through history.
Blake, do you feel like you're getting an education in the moment here?
Toby, when you sent me the outline, I thought, who on earth would know any of this?
Kent Morris.
I was afraid you were reaching, and I'm like, dang, Kent does know all of it. Saying that a glass panel was just an LED wall before electricity.
An LED or a stained glass window.
Yeah, whatever you just said, that's amazing to me.
Yeah. And Kent, we often think, again, our context is often so limited to what we understand. And so, younger people might not even understand there were analog mixers before digital ones. But you're saying even before electricity was ever applied to church production, it existed for thousands of years, and people were intrinsic experts at using their environments to create production rather than apply electricity to it.
Exactly. I mean, you think about, when we talk, hey, that person stepped into the limelight. The limelight was a chemical reaction lit and created that brilliant white light that became what is today an LED spotlight. So we're just derivatives. Jeff Sandstrom says it best. He says, we rent every idea we have.
Mm-hmm. The limelight. I didn't even know that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, isn't that cool? There's so many fascinating things.
Yeah.
I'd love to see Toby's bank account, because I bet all of the charges are just for renting every idea he's ever had, because he doesn't get to own any of them.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing a little sidebar here, but I love how often people will learn about church gear, and if they've been around the church for a while, been around church production, they'll say, "Oh, I had that idea years ago." I'm like, "Yep, it's not an original idea. I'm just stubborn enough to do it."
When I get to
Seems to me there's a verse that there's nothing new under the sun.
Yep.
When I get to heaven, I want to ask so badly, why Toby Walters, God? This idea would have worked for anybody. And I bet his answer is going to be no one else was crazy enough to say yes.
And nobody else would be crazy enough to hire you, Blake.
Hey, you needed two crazies together equal a positive.
Something like that.
Just
or
like math.
Maybe not a positive, but a podcast.
There we go.
Yeah. So, Kent, if we... imagine a demarcation line in history of church production as kind of like we applied electricity to production elements as we understand them today. When does that moment kind of start?
It's really funny because the LDS Church, Latter Day Saints Church, was at the forefront of this in 1922, before there was even NBC or CBS. On KLS out in Utah, they had the first commercial operation. And then the crazy part is, as these things begin to develop, one of the strongest segments of early radio was religious broadcasting. Because if you're a preacher and you're talking to 63 people on Sunday, and now all of a sudden you talk to 6,300 people on Sunday, well, you're going to jump on that. And obviously we see that in, through Billy Graham, all of the great radio preachers of the mid-20th century. But if we look back, even more fascinating to me is the BBC. So in England, the British Broadcasting Corporation was founded in 1931. And even today, if you walk into the entrance there, it's dedicated to the glory of God, to understanding wisdom, and it quotes Philippians 4:8. It's like, Okay, so we're not an ancillary to this. We're not a subset of this. We're not a aftermarket of this. That was the central core. And Biola out in California, the Bible Institute of Los Angeles, 1922. They're specifically doing all of these radio broadcasts on a standard basis. And I remember my father in the 60s would broadcast radio, and then we would send out packets to the people that would respond, and they were Bible studies. And then they would fill out a little questionnaire test and send it back. We would grade it and say, well, here's what Paul meant in this section. And you did all this via the mail and via radio. And then internally, within the physical aspect of the church building, that mid to late 20th century, so the late 50s, early 60s, the watershed moment secularly, obviously, is 1965. Shea Stadium, the Beatles, they're playing, and they have stacks, columns there, and the vocal masters, and basically they're overwhelmed by tens of thousands of teenage girls. The band looked at each other and said, we can't hear, we're lost. They're standing 10 feet away through an amplifier and loud drums on Ringo's case, and they can't hear each other because the girls 400 feet away are louder than their amp is 5 feet away. So then you have the beautiful aspect of the Clare brothers. The Clare brothers step up and say, we can take care of that. And so Roy Clare and his brother built out, today Clare Systems is unbelievably huge, but that's where it all began and immediately transferred into the church. Not secondarily, but immediately, because so many people at church, have secular jobs where they're working with radio stations or cinemas, Voice of the Theater, Altec Systems, all that. So that's where it all came from.
And so you've got, you're bringing in live sound reinforcement into church buildings that I assume at this point, none of them were designed for live and sound reinforcement. So, is it pleasant? Is it a good setup, a situation when they first start doing this?
No. And you came in on the tail end of this in the early 90s, because every building built, the heyday of Protestantism in the U.S. was the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So all those churches that were built during that time frame were built for speech reinforcement, organ, choir reinforcement, occasionally orchestra reinforcement, and through the natural means of the building itself, with an occasional, single JBL raw loudspeaker at the top that then emanated the pastor's voice. But those rooms are not built for what we did with them in the 90s, and it became kind of a bit of a disaster. And Toby would understand this. We sat there all through this beginning in the 70s with the Jesus movement, the Jesus Freaks out in California, Chuck Smith Sr., Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, guys like Laurie and all of it, Chuck Fromm at Worship Leader Maranatha, all of these people in the 70s, they bring in their amplifiers and drums to churches, and all of a sudden it's chaos. Well, the old people were not complaining necessarily because they didn't like the music, though they didn't. But they're complaining that it sounds terrible. And it did. I mean, just awful. So it took us a long time to get the buildings built that began to reflect what was going on. And we began to see this in the mid-90s through the fan-shaped auditoriums, Bill Hybels in Chicago, and Rick Warren in California, First Baptist Dallas, First Baptist Atlanta, as these churches began to build out these facilities that actually allowed amplified instruments to function in the room.
And so who would you say, as far as we understand modern church production today, who are some of the most influential churches that have, instituted what we see today?
Well, on the SBC side, Southern Baptist Convention side, Preston Wood, they're all over the top. They jump the shark on a regular basis. So, that's just stunning what they do. And Life Church, Crossroads, obviously Elevation, Bethel, all the ones that typically come to mind. But then what's cool to me, and with budgets of, 3 or 4 million a year for technology, you could do a lot of stuff. But if I'm a mid-sized church of 500 and I have a budget of maybe 12,000 a year, what cool things are coming out of there? That's what's exciting to me, because like at Philo and Experience and different conferences, I meet these people who are 1/3 my age, they're 20, and they're doing things that I would never think of. And it's like, that is so cool, that are inventing inexpensive ways to do really cool stuff. I'm fascinated by that. That's why I love what God is doing with people who are under 30, just watching them know no bounds and not be held back and just jump in there and do it.
Do you feel like, we can watch Elevation, we can watch Prestonwood, we can see what they're doing online. You don't have to go to their cities anymore to experience their production and their worship. There are certainly pros and cons. And then if you're this 500-person church, if you're a 200-person church, and you're trying to recreate some of these elements, how would you advise to maybe zoom back out to the entire history of church production, the biblical theology of it, before you inform, a little church saying, well, we want to recreate Elevation? Do you have a theology of production that you would start with?
That is such a great question. And yes, and I'm glad that should have been my beginning statement, because you're so wise to think of that. Yes, indeed, because if we're just trying to emulate Elevation or et cetera, then we're simply going to be a poor version of them. Let's be the best version of us, according to what God has in plan for our congregation and our gathering, and not just something that is cool. Because the problem with church production, and this has been the way since when I started in 1976, when I was 14, is that whatever you do this Sunday, the next Sunday, that's the beginning step for what you've got to do above that. So it's called the ratchet effect. You can't go backward. And then the way we actually turn the ratchet back is we have a thing we call, let's go acoustic Sunday. Well, that's where we dialed it back to where we were. So because we've run out of ideas and money to make it do anything else, right? Yeah. So the theology is that what pleases God. And so Malachi tells us, that it's caring for the widows and the orphans. It's having a pure heart and when walking before God. Nowhere in there does it say striking an awesome scene with my movers, but we can set awesome scenes with our movers as long as those awesome scenes are within context. That's the whole thing, is that we want to lead our congregations, we want to lead our own leadership, but we have to do so just half a step ahead. That's the biggest thing to me, is watching people burn out from church tech, because sometimes you work 80 hours a week, and the leadership assumes you're going to do this. And that you're in a very bad situation where 5 minutes before service, they drop something new on you, or Saturday afternoon, they drop something new on you, and they do that on a consistent basis. And you always come through. That's not the issue. The issue is, well, now you've lost your family. And if there was one thing that I learned from watching really big ministries and being part of those big ministries, is that at the end of the day, the theology stays. That's what keeps it ingrained. And nobody goes out, humming the light show, and nobody goes out thinking about the snare drum reverb. Did they get meat? Did they get fed through the song, spoken, and prayed word of God? That is the theology that matters. That pulls it in. If what I'm doing right now on my console is embracing that and making that more possible, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
If it's in the way, it's a bad thing.
Yeah, I think, there are a lot of people that, details matter strongly to them, but they get so bogged down in the details, like your snare drum reverb, that they forget the theology of why we're even doing this. But I think it can also be the opposite, that you have some churches out there that just say, we don't do much production. We think that's not of God. That's not a biblical thing. But you also said in the Bible, God is very intentional about the details. He has very high expectations for his worship spaces, and very detailed. How would you advise the churches that just say, production isn't an essential ministry to us?
I would say let's pack up and let's head to Africa and let's go meet some people. And when you're in Africa, or when you're in certain countries, South America, or you're in certain countries in Asia, and the church is huge there. Guatemala, the church is amazing. In Zambia, the church is amazing. And those churches pull off production, but they pull off production with literally 2 sticks. And I'm like, how do you guys do this? They'll take an old 6-channel box mixer and do things with it that are literally impossible to do. And I stand in amazement at the talent, skill, and creativity of these people who just take what God has given them, whatever it may be, to, just two fish and 5 loaves, and be able to just multiply that. So the production has to happen because we build buildings that don't work without the production. So if we build a black box or any room, say of 200 people, and you stand at the front with no PA, you're not going to get heard past the 4th row. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
So it is absolutely essential to that building. Now, if we want to go build a building like Billy Sunday built in New Jersey, where he can seat 5,000 with no sound system and everybody can hear, let's do that. That's not what we do. We build metal buildings for cheap. And when you do that, you got to amplify it. You got to light it. You got to put video up. It's just a fact of life.
Okay, so let's talk about a black box, as the cliche as we like to talk about these modern church buildings. And then, pastors or visionaries or worship leaders, they throw a lot of money at it for technology. Like, let's get a big fancy sound system in there. Let's get lights. Let's get video. And then they oftentimes have a product that doesn't work in the church. Or there are foundations like, did you think about the acoustical properties before you put a big sound system in there? Did you treat that? Did you think about the content you're going to have to create before you got an LED wall in there? What are those foundational issues that often get ignored because we see what Elevation does and we're like, we want all that technology?
That's another great question. The basic idea that I try to, and when I'm consulting with churches, is what can you do on your least Sunday? That is the Sunday after Easter, when no one is there, all the volunteers aren't there, that type of thing. If we're going to have to pull this off with 3 people and a piece of gum, then we need to make that target low enough that we can actually hit it. And it's awesome to do higher, better, cooler things. I get all that. I love that. But it's not fun 26 weeks in. You're halfway through the year and you think, what? I've got to come up with content every single, So we have this thing at FBA. It's like Sunday's always coming. It's like always Sunday. Sunday comes more than once a week, and it's always a challenge. Like, planning center, getting the rehearsals done, getting the lighting cues laid in, who's going to be on which mic, making sure the batteries are right. It's the hundreds of things you have to deal with, and being able to keep that low enough that it is not only doable but enjoyable. That's a challenge. I mean, how many of us that do this kind of dread, Saturday afternoon to 4:00, we're great. And about 5:00, we're thinking, we're going to be grumpy the rest of the night because we know what's going to happen tomorrow and I can't stop it and it's coming and it's inevitable and there's going to be a problem. And, you just get in that mindset, and that's such a depressing mindset to be in when we get to worship the God of the universe. And so I want to help churches understand, make the acoustics right, forget the sound system. The better the acoustics, the less sound system you have. You can take a well-tuned, well-implemented room and put a low-cost, decent, MI level music store kind of product. It'll be just fine. Versus trying to put an L Acoustics ELISA in there. It's like, no, it's not going to work in this room because the room's never going to accept it. The room always wins.
Yeah. Blake, it's kind of like you often tell me, because I'm a visionary, I can't stop my ideas. And so I'll throw you an idea and you're like, that's great. How are we going to pull it off? And, with the idea of this podcast, man, every week we tell people, people that ask, like, how do you do it every week? I'm like, ask Blake.
Toby's not much of a how guy.
Yeah, no.
But he is a spend money guy, and so I just pay the producer $100,000. I pay myself a tidy $500,000, and between
Perfect.
Those two, we can make it happen.
Yeah, I am a don't spend money guy, and I'm like an idea guy. So
it's a bad combination.
It is a bad combination. So you have to very carefully pick your ideas you want to get into. So kind of like you're alluding to, Ken, that if you watch Elevation, you think, let's do that at our church. Well, Elevation probably has, 30 people every Sunday working on that production team, millions of dollars a year in keeping that running. some of the most talented worship and production people on the planet making that happen.
Yes.
Do you have anywhere close to that context at your church? And if you don't, right size your expectations. Well, Kent, where do you imagine this all going in the next, 20, 30, 50 years? Are we moving to more and more and more technology? Or do you maybe even see a trend where we might pull back some too in the church?
Is stained glass windows making a comeback?
Yeah, well, actually, they are, and it's having to do it in new ways. We can't use lead, et cetera. But if you go to any artisan environment, Asheville, North Carolina, anything like that, obviously there's so many people who are gifted with light fracture and that type of thing. And yes, it definitely is making a comeback. It's just expensive. But if you make that part of the church project and you can attract those artisans, then you have something where you can actually build that out and see that come to place. Back in the early 2000s, we would have a painter on the stage with the pastor as the pastor preached, and over 30 minutes, that painter would then bring that to life. Same kind of thing, just in a much longer timeline, where we build out art within the church that has staying power, that doesn't go away at the end of 3 weeks and get trashed as we come up with the next series. And that's the fast food thing kind of drives me crazy a little bit, where we, do this for 9 weeks and we trash that and do something else. And it just burns everyone out. Trying to get a longer timeline on it, which goes back to our black box talk, is that if we turned everything to a black box because we wanted to emulate a live theater, and we did such an awesome job of that, basically we shut out all light and all function and we created it from scratch, then we become our own gods. We can have it be anything we want, which I respect and understand. However, there's a bigger picture here, is that what if we let God be able to do that on his own? In other words, let God bring the light in on a Sunday morning. River Bend Church in Austin, Texas is right there in the bend of the river.
Yeah.
The back of it's all glass. It's a nightmare to light, and it's a nightmare to camera, and it's a nightmare to do sound. But when that sun comes in, it's gorgeous when the sun comes right. You're like, okay, God, you win. All right, I'll put my little clay packy back in the box and go back to my little MA console. But no, moving forward, I mean, obviously, we don't know what the technology is going to do. We don't know how much we can really change within the paradigm. In other words, within the paradigm of right now, we're doing the same thing with sound that we did 100 years ago. We're using a piston to compress and rarefy air in front of it, and that then is perceived to us as sound. There's technologies on the horizon that bypass that entirely, and I'm working on some of those. Those are amazing, and it may end up being the future of sound. Same thing with lighting, is that we all perceive light in different ways. And what if we don't have to generate this massive part of light? But what if light is then emanating from, as we do with the LED walls, from literally millions of pixels, but in a different environment, not inside of a 16:9 box, but something outside of that. Same thing with video and acoustics and staging, everything else. Just the creativity that God has imbued in people who are working on this is fascinating to me. So I think that really being able to be, as the Gen Z likes to say, is being authentic with it, taking the technology and doing it not for the sake of the technology, because it actually has a value outside of itself. I mean, just because a mover does this, so what? It has to be able to function within the context of what the church is trying to do.
And do you think, historically, the last few decades, it's been the Willow Creeks, the Elevations, the Preston Woods that have the budget, that have the space, that have the talent. And if you want to experience world-class production, it's almost that you had to go to a church of that size and that ilk. But do you feel like with the way technology is shrinking everything, bringing the price point down, even AI maybe making things easier to use, that you can have churches of 200 where technology and production can be amazing because of the way it's moving?
Yes, I do. Going to the AI model, being able to, if things work out according to the positive, versus if we have more of a Star Trek future than a Star Wars future.
Terminator was a warning.
Yeah. Then if we do end up in a more utopian kind of environment, then I see it obviously being able to reach on that individual level, to the point that we're working on some technologies now that bypass the entire air moving system so that people who are deaf or extremely hard of hearing are not relying then on these types of devices, but we conduct to them through their body and they hear in full range. And just as Helen Keller used to wrap her arms around a radio, and that's how she heard and understood, doing the same thing. So that reaching those who are disaffected by normal sensing, and then also reaching those who have a different modality. Is that if I go to Nigeria, the church there worships very differently than it does here. And one of the worst things we did in the 90s is we exported all of our happy praise and worship Hosanna stuff over there, and then they emulated it. It's like, well, yeah, that's kind of okay, but you guys are so much better at all this stuff that we are. Let's learn from you. And then now we have this, this bidirectional thing. And that to me is where technology works, is that if I can learn from an audio engineer in the Philippines, then I am doing something, because they hear differently, they function differently, their approach is different, and they're going to open up all sorts of avenues I never thought about in my little closed American mind.
Yeah. Amazing. Blake, what percentage of this are you following today? I know we just did 2 days in a row of company meetings, and so your brain is a little more fried than normal.
Yeah, part of the company meeting was a game that we played, and instead of Run Across the Creek, I picked Chug CH4. Well, I got a B in advanced honors chemistry, and so I didn't know that meant gas. So I had to chug a whole thing of beans, so I'm still kind of floating in gas and brain right now.
I get it. I've seen you levitate a couple times out of your chair, just, rocket launcher out of your
I've burned a hole through this seat right here.
I figure.
Which is making this chair look a little bit like a disaster.
Oh, you're throwing it back to me.
I was throwing it to dang it,
See,
Toby.
I totally fumbled the ball. So, Kent, we always love a good disaster story here on the podcast. Do you have any that, contextually fit for the topic we're talking about today? The history of church production or theology of church production? Any of that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was in Papua New Guinea a few years back, and we were doing a big training for all the Dutch churches. They were big. And so they had all the Dutch churches come in, and I was doing this big, massive training on sound, lights, and video. And hundreds of people were there. And it was in a neighborhood, nice sized church. Everything was working great, tested everything. And literally 3 minutes before we start, power goes out everywhere. Well, you can't teach technology without power. Yeah. It's like, well, we're just kind of stuck literally in the dark. I can't see them. They can't see me. We're standing around. And one of the guys said that was put on said, hey, what if we just prayed about this? So we all found each other with our little phone lights, and we sat around and we began to pray. And then literally 8 minutes later, the lights come on in the church. Well, that's cool. All right, they've restored power. Well, somebody happened to go outside and looked around, and literally for miles, it's like 9 o'clock at night. There's no lighting anywhere. There's no power in the entire city except our little building.
Wow.
It was the most bizarre thing. And it just, for some reason, God thought it was important enough that he let us have the power. And it just, and it's a disaster that again, just showing God's supreme ability to do what he wants to do and to make our little world happen. So we set it all up. We did the whole thing, had the band up there and the whole bit. And because nobody else had power and there was no TVs on or anything, everybody started coming into our little training session. Our little training session turned into a massive worship service. So that's kind of cool.
That is amazing.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So maybe the takeaway is to pray before or during every disaster moment.
Kind of a good idea.
Never underestimate the power of prayer.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And Blake, I feel like if the power went out, it would actually just go out for our podcast, and then the rest of the world would have power. But God's like, shut that thing off.
Yeah. I mean, I'm waiting for you to get smited at any moment, which is why I don't want to fly with you to Dallas. That is my takeaway from that point. But Kent, if you were going to give us a tech takeaway to wrap us up, man, what would you give to a room full of production people?
Number one is don't fail in heart. 1 Corinthians 15:58 is that be steadfast. Just keep at it. Sunday's always coming, but Sunday will come and Sunday will happen. It will go on, unmovable, always abounding, because you know that your labor is not in vain. So even if you get yelled at, I mean, it's just so amazing. We all work in tech, and I don't know if you who are on staff sit through debriefs, but debriefs on Monday, Tuesday are the most demoralizing thing on the planet. You know, here are the 93 things you did wrong. And it's just the way it is. We have to get better, and we respect that. But don't lose heart. Don't lose heart. God knows what you're doing. You can get mad and quit, and that's totally fine. Then you'll just be miserable for the next 6 months. Do you end up somewhere else? So we all go through the same cycle. We are all stuck with this thing that will not let go of us, where we have to fix it. We have to do it. We have to mix it. We have to put the light up. We have to get the video right. We have to get the font right, and just embrace it. Like, okay, that's who you are. That's what you're going to do. Don't fight it. Just embrace it. It's God. It's how God made you. And so just go with it.
Love that.
It's hard quitting your job, you know. The devil, I know this devil sitting across from me very well. It's scary to, switch jobs. Maybe I'll actually switch for the real Satan. That would be bad. I better just stay with this little devil, Toby.
Exactly.
I fired you thousands of times, and yet you just won't leave. So that one's on you now.
I noticed, where is my paycheck?
Yeah.
Guy from the
It's where
office.
your stapler is. It's not the office. It's Office Space.
I was pretty close.
Gosh, Blake.
And, like most of this episode, we were pretty close. Kent, we really appreciate you joining us, man. Is there anywhere you want to point people towards, anything you want to plug?
Well, Sweetwater has just been so gracious to me. People write in all the time that how much they love their sales engineer and the candy and all this stuff. It's really that company. They're not this big monolith. They're just good people in the Midwest up in Indiana that try to do right by people. And I cannot say enough good things about Sweetwater. I have lived it. The people are amazing. I'm so honored to be part of that company.
And I do have to file one formal complaint with Sweetwater is that you removed the atomic red fireballs from your candy selection.
Yes. The complaint was that they managed to smell everything else in the bag.
That's fine.
I know it. So we're working on that. We've gone through different things. We're like, well, do we double bag the atomic fireballs by themselves? So that they're working on it.
Yeah.
So we are acutely aware of the issue.
And I just want to go to Sweetwater and order just a bag of atomic fireballs. But I guess you could do that on anywhere.
2 questions. Kent, can you just buy the candy directly on Sweetwater's website? Can you buy like extra packs?
I don't think so, because we are the largest candy dealer in Indiana, but we give it all away. So it's kind of like, well, that's kind of odd. We used to have people doing it, but it's a very repetitive task, and you can, over time it gets to be really boring. So if machines do it and now watched by people, you can specify if you wanted only, bits of honey or atomic fireballs. You can tell your SE, that's all I want. That's all you'll get. And if we do ever forget it, then we try to make it up tenfold.
Yeah.
So how many people's full-time job is it just to watch a machine pack candy?
Well, there were 4 packers. And so I think that, of course, Sweetwater's never laid anybody off. So I think there are 4 people now watching the machines.
Okay.
All right. And there's going to be 5. I'm headed to Fort Wayne to go work in Sweetwater. Toby, it's been real.
Yep.
I'm going to trade up my church beer for my sweet beer.
No, your sweet beer. Church beer for sweet beer.
There we go.
Yeah.
Ken, thanks for joining us, man. We really appreciate the time.
Thank you guys so much.
And now it's time for a Church Tech Confessional, where church production people confess the worst thing they've ever done in church production. Here's
One year, my church was doing a large Easter egg hunt, and typically this got thousands of people, but this particular year, it was really cold and rainy in Ohio, and not very many people showed up. My senior pastor was insistent that we keep going. Well, we had 2 hours left, and no one really wanted to be there, so I may or may not have killed the generator to end the Easter egg hunt early, and we all went inside and got ready for Saturday service.
Hey, do you have your own Church Tech Confessional that's, 45 seconds to 2 minutes? Send it to blake@churchgear.com, and you might just hear it on the podcast.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope to see you back next week for more absurd stories, tech takeaways, and overall buffoonery here at the Church Gear Studios.
Toby, I think we have a real opportunity here to start putting those fireballs in our packaging now that they've been missed.
Or maybe we should just put them in my book.
That's right. We could do that. It would get the pages all messed up, but it's not like people are going to read it anyways.
Exactly.
But if they were going to read it, where should they go?
They should go to tobywalters.com or churchgear.com/TobyWalters. It's the same page.
So churchgear.com/TobyWalters, not churchbeer.com/TobyWalters.
Correct. Churchbeer.com/TobyWalters will get you somewhere very different.